Tonight's show was scripted by Jeannie Henderson with research by Isabel Carmichael. So if you don't like it, you know who to blame. Ted Pulse will be the voice of J. Edgar Hoover in the government. David Catletto will voice Congressman Carl Jeanette and the defense lawyer in the trial at Washington, D.C. Isabel Carmichael will voice the concerned public and the East Baton Star's editor, Jeanette Edwards-Rattray. And I will be the voice of Amagansett's great historian, Carlton Kelsey. Here we go. We're here this evening to mark an event that happened 83 years ago in this very place, in this very building, along these very shores. June 13th, 1942. Nazi saboteurs land in Amagansett with the intent to wreak havoc on American industrial sites. What do we know about that night? Well, thanks to the many records and first-hand accounts from the men who were on duty here at this Coast Guard station, we know a lot. In past years, we've reenacted the event as it happened that night, but now we're going to go beyond what we know, or we thought we knew, to explore the days and weeks after June 13th. For the first time, we have access to an incredible trove of information surrounding the saboteurs. For years, 30 to be exact, the FBI has kept these documents under wraps. Why? Well, first, let's go back to that night in 1942 and retell the story of the landing with the help of a Movie-Tone News and a 1943 Hollywood film called They Came to Blow Up America.
Rear Admiral Parker presents the Legion of Merit to Coast Guardsman John C. Cullen.
I take pleasure in presenting to you this medal, which has been awarded to you.
2 German submarines left their base at Lorient, France in May 1942. One landed on Long Island, the other in Florida. 4 saboteurs landed from each.
What time will we be off Amagansett?
10:40, American time. You might as well get used to it. You'll be taking up a lot of it from now on.
Gute Reise. Danke. Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler.
Contributed to the rubber collection they're having over here. Hello there. What's the trouble?
Cover it up quick. I'll handle him.
What are you doing?
Fishing for clams? Why?
There are no clams around here.
We found that out.
Oh, so you want to
Do anything foolish. Put that gun down. He'll listen to reason, won't you?
It depends, mister. What goes on?
Just a little business transaction, nothing serious. You're a Coast Guardsman, aren't you? Not a policeman? What do you care what we do with the stuff?
Oh, I see. There's no skin off my nose.
How much to forget that you saw us?
Well,
That's $300.
thanks, buddy. I ain't seen nothing.
Okay.
You should have put him away.
No, he'd have been missed. Get back to your work and hurry up.
Hey, Charlie, there's some suspicious guys down on the beach.
What makes you think they're suspicious?
They tried to bribe me. They gave me $300.
Well, they're suspicious, all right. They shortchanged you $40.
Why, the chiselers?
You men arm yourselves and come with me.
Mr. J. Edgar Hoover and his G-men have a tremendous job watching nearly 5,000 miles of coast for enemy sneak invaders. These official American pictures show how cases of explosives and other means of sabotage from Germany were found buried in the Florida sands by 8 Nazi spies. Captured equipment included uniforms for the spies after landing, a money belt containing $170,000 American to finance deeds of destruction, and some innocent-looking pens and pencils which in reality are heavily charged incendiaries. Now listen to a word from Mr. Hoover, chief of the G-men.
The recent landing of saboteurs from Nazi submarines sounded a new alert for all Americans. They were apprehended before they could carry out their plans of destruction.
The trial of the would-be saboteurs is held in strictest secrecy, one of the witnesses being the former fiancé of Herbert Haupt, one of the accused. They were put ashore from U-boats to spread destruction, but now the people of the United States are demanding their destruction. They're lucky, for in Nazi Germany there wouldn't even be a trial.
The penalty is death. A party of saboteurs were found by Coast Guardsman Cullen, and they resorted to bribes and threats. It was his report that led to the detection of the gang and the breaking up of a dangerous conspiracy.
All that began right here.
That was George Sanders playing the key character we're going to concentrate on tonight, one George John Dash, the appointed leader of the saboteurs. The film took a lot of liberties, but it shows the plain facts of that night as well as the final verdicts of the men who came ashore. George Sanders, as you remember, won an Academy Award for supporting actor for All About Eve in 1950. But before that, he was suspended twice by Fox Pictures for refusing parts. When the suspension was lifted, you know what the first movie he made? This one. They came to blow up America. For many people, the story ended right there. Cullen a hero, the saboteurs caught and punished, but buried in these FBI boxes are testimonials, letters, trial summations, newspaper accounts, presidential edicts, FBI secret files, citizens in protest, citizens in agreement. So many questions. So few answers. You're up, Mrs. Rattray.
First of all, what did the people of East Hampton Town think about all of this? When did we find out what was happening and how did we react? This was the biggest story in America. Nazis on Long Island, saboteurs, killers. Was there panic? Was there fear? No, because no one here knew anything about it, at least not officially. The story, even when it was told in a public place that very night after it happened, sounded so fantastic that hardly anyone believed it. Not until July 2nd was the Star permitted to write about it, following J. Edgar Hoover's startling announcement on the radio 2 weeks after the landing, during which time all 8 saboteurs had miraculously been captured and were in custody.
July 2nd, 1942. I have a very important announcement to make. I want all of you to listen carefully. This is serious business. The recent landing of saboteurs from Nazi submarines sounds a new alert for Americans. The FBI has seized 8 saboteurs landed in U-boats in New York and in Florida to blow up war plants. FBI agents have been pursuing the saboteurs almost from the moment the group first set foot on United States soil, and we have recovered enough sabotage equipment for a 2-year campaign of terror.
Wait, but in the story in the paper it says that a young Coast Guardsman came upon the foreign invaders and challenged them. They discussed killing him, then offered him a bribe of $300 to keep his mouth shut. He went along with it, but sounded the alarm back at the station as soon as he could. By the time the Coast Guard got back down to the beach, the 4 daring saboteurs had got out of town by simply walking to the Amagansett train station and buying tickets from Ira Baker, the station agent. Ira?
One of the men, about 35 years old, and have a bright, swarthy complexion, said in good English, "Well, sir, the fishing's been pretty good out here with all this fog. Guess we'll go back home. 4 tickets to Jamaica, please." Well, train came in time, off they go. Thought nothing of it. They were lucky. The first Amagansett train station burned down. And in 1910, when they built a new one, Ira Baker, the agent, said, "I'm not coming here." He lived in Hampton Bays. "I'm not coming here unless you put an apartment on the 2nd floor." So if they did put an apartment on the 2nd floor, that might not have been an agent there. And where were they going to get the tickets? Because I don't think you could get on the train in 1942 and buy your ticket. Okay, that's it. This is right here.
Here's a letter to the editor from Private Don Schellinger, who is somewhere in the South Pacific. He says, "I have just read the July 2nd issue of the Star with the story of the Nazi landing in Amagansett. Well, all that I can say for those Nazi saboteurs is that they haven't a chance up against those Bonnickers. I guess I have the old saying of Bonnick against the world."
And here's another letter to the editor. On the night of the landing, Long Island was not exactly armed to the teeth to prevent such a landing. A lot of deadly work could have been accomplished by those same 4 spies if, instead of struggling across the beach with heavy wooden cases to bury them in the sand, these Nazi saboteurs had come in with machine guns and hand grenades. The resultant panic on Long Island would have been worth the lives of 5 spies to the Nazis.
Mrs. Jeanette Edwards Rattray, editor of the Star, goes on to say, "There are many angles that provoke argument. Why did 4 desperate characters try to bribe a man in uniform rather than kill him on the spot? Was the whole thing a hoax?"
This from Kenneth K. Kirwan, Jr., captain in the Military Intelligence Service. The incident was a hoax perpetrated by Cullen to bring attention to himself. This would explain why Cullen wasn't killed but bribed instead. The Coast Guardman was known to the agents, which is why they allowed him to live. He may have been a friend. He may have previously conspired with them in smuggling activities. But then he became frightened when he became acquainted with the nature of the material being buried.
We know now that it was no hoax. But here's another question. Why did they land at such a public place so near occupied houses? Why did they leave incriminating papers?
Look, it says here, disobeying orders to bring nothing of German origin with them, one of the saboteurs, Ernst Peter Berger, had brought a bottle of schnapps and a package of German cigarettes. He threw these articles and his hat, which bore German insignias, along the beach. While burying the boxes of explosives, he dragged the sea bags through the sand, leaving a trail to the hidden catch. Was he trying to alert officials to their landing?
Did they have accomplices on the shore? The FBI compiled a list of possible suspects. Franz Janet, a German alien who operated the Little Inn at P. Adolf Steinspelt, who operated the Montauk Motel, a seafaring man born in Germany. Hein Puster, a German waiter at the Oaks, a roadhouse near East Hampton. Frank J. Eck, American citizen of Italian extraction, who operated the Elm Tree Inn in Amagansett.
Frank Eck? Everybody knew Frank. I knew him. And we all went to the Elm Tree Inn. Interesting to note that George Dash, the leader of the saboteurs, lived in America for many years and that was one time a waiter at a restaurant in East Hampton. Now wait for this. Frank Eck built that Elm Tree Inn in 1937 with a man named Peter Frederico. You know who he was? Jungle Pete's. Okay?
Oh.
Yeah. And now, can you believe this? In 1943, 1 year after this, the Amagansett Fire Department built its new firehouse right next to the Elm Tree Inn, and after their meetings, they would come over to the Elm Tree Inn and drink beer. Do you think they ever realized that Frank Eck and the Elm Tree Inn was on the FBI's suspect?
Oh. Wow.
The FBI interviewed Carl Jeanette, officer in charge of the Coast Guard station, on June 13th.
Well, sir, I was more concerned about a light in a cottage along the beach than any threat of Nazi invasion. Lights were prohibited under blackout regulations, and I believed someone might be trying to send a signal. The house to the east of us was lit up. A big porch light burned up until Cullen went out on his patrol. When Cullen reported back about the men on the beach, I took my men down there. At that minute, the front light on this house came on. A man walks out, looks around, and then he cuts the light off, goes back in the house. He wasn't in there long, and then he comes out and he's whistling, like he's whistling for a dog, but no dog showed up. I put 2 men on guard. Later, I was told by your FBI agents, oh, that house was investigated and it was 2 old maid school teachers living there. And I said, no, sir. My whole crew saw him and I saw him. Maybe it was a signal, maybe it was a coincidence, but I never felt right about it.
So, the 4 saboteurs got away, got to New York with over $100,000 on them. That would translate to almost $2 million today. The 2 leaders, George Dash and Ernest Berger, were living a high life in the city, buying clothes, eating in good restaurants, booked into a top hotel. After a week, they contacted the FBI. Well, and here's where the story gets complicated. Was this the plan all along? Did Dash and Berger train the saboteurs only to go back to America as double agents? Or was the decision to turn themselves in a last-minute ploy to become heroes in the eyes of the Americans, blowing the whistle on the whole plan?
Dash called the FBI's New York office from a telephone booth while Berger waited outside. The conversation did not go the way Dash thought it would. Dash said that his name was Franz Daniel Pastorius.
How about that? The whole operation had been named Operation Pastorius by the Germans. Pastorius was the name of the man who organized the first German colony in America, in Pennsylvania.
He said his name was Francis Dale Pastorius, and that he and 3 other men had come ashore from a German submarine, and he wanted to meet with J. Edgar Hoover. The agent assured Dash that he would contact Washington and relay the information to FBI headquarters. Actually, Agent McWhorter dismissed Dash as a crank.
Well, frustrated, Dash did go to Washington, while Berger remained in New York, assuring the other 2 saboteurs who were waiting instructions in another hotel that the mission was on track. Meanwhile, the second sub had landed successfully in Florida, and those 4 Florida saboteurs had buried their explosives and they were making their way north to Chicago.
At this point, now a week after the landing, J. Edgar Hoover knew about as much as the rest of us did, which was nil. The FBI men were swarming all over East Hampton, questioning people. The Coast Guard led them to the buried weapons, which they confiscated. But no one knew where the Germans had gone beyond those train tickets to New York. And no one knew about the Florida landing. Saboteurs, all 8 of them, were on the loose.
At 10:50 a.m. on June 19th, Dash arrived in the FBI office in Washington. He started the interview by saying that he just made a long trip from Germany and had a number of things on his mind. He wanted to tell them in his own way, beginning at the very beginning and taking his time. He was promised immunity from the prosecution for the information. He called in a stenographer, and Dash proceeded to dictate for 5 days. And on June 24th, he read and corrected his statement, signing each page in ink. This statement consisted of 254 typewritten pages. I, however, had every bit of information needed to capture all 6 saboteurs at large. I had been promised immunity. Dash and Berger were also arrested and charged, but were told this was only to cover up their role as informants.
Well, President Roosevelt was now informed of the plot, but Hoover and the Attorney General, Francis Biddle, met and agreed that the President should not be informed that it was Dash and Berger who provided the information leading to the capture of the saboteurs. The FBI took credit for the swift apprehension of these scoundrels. In short order, Roosevelt called for a secret military trial.
Why a military trial? And why was it secret?
The War Department issued this, quote, "It is of the utmost importance to our national security that no information reach Germany on the following matters: how the saboteurs were so swiftly apprehended, how our intelligence services were equipped to work against them, how our coastal defenses are manned, or how much have we learned about German sabotage methods."
Yeah, but Lloyd and Cutler, a member of the prosecution team at the court-martial, said, quote, "I think the major reason that the trial was kept secret was the fact that it wasn't the FBI that had done the real work in capturing the Nazis. It was 2 of the Nazis who did it."
July 8th, mere 3.5 weeks since the landing at Amagansett, the trial begins.
And what a show! The Washington Times Dispatch writes, "All the drama, action, and thrills that go with war, death, and intrigue were written into a rapid-moving transport today, with sirens blaring and soldiers mounted on the running board with machine guns, as 8 Nazi spies were rushed from the army-guarded district jail to the Department of Justice building."
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The court is in session.
For the defense, may it please the court to know that none of the Pastorius members performed any act of sabotage in the United States. They did not hurt anybody. They did not blow anything up. It is said their intentions were bad. The law has always drawn a distinction between what a man intends to do and what he does. Under United States law and confirmed by the Attorney General, the best they can be prosecuted for is conspiracy and given a maximum sentence of 30 years.
For the prosecution, the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, has decided that these men should be properly and publicly punished as war criminals. He has created a military tribunal to prosecute all 8 saboteurs.
Dash and Berger went to the FBI voluntarily, and their information was directly responsible for the breakup of the sabotage plot.
Dash turned himself into the FBI, but only because his group had been discovered on the beach by Seaman John Cullen. Perhaps he thought the whole project so grandiose as to be impractical and wanted to protect himself before some of his companions took action on similar doubts.
Supreme Court ruling declares that civilians can never be brought before a military tribunal if civilian courts are open and properly functioning.
It is unclear whether or not the saboteurs are civilians. It is also unclear whether the United States Supreme Court decision applies to foreigners. The president wants to dispose of the saboteur case in as swift and efficiently as possible. A military tribunal will save a considerable amount of time.
The military court can bring in a death penalty. A civilian court cannot.
We are a nation at war. That is the essential fact on which this case turns. We cannot fight a war and respect legal niceties at the same time. As enemy soldiers, these men invaded our country in the dark of night for the purpose of committing acts of sabotage, espionage, and other hostile acts, and therefore could have been immediately shot by the military when caught in the act of invasion. Instead, they were humanely ordered to be tried by a military tribunal.
We want to win this war, and we will win this war. But we do not want to win it by throwing everything we are fighting for away. Our constitutional law guarantees that an enemy soldier, unless within a theater of war or combat, is entitled to the same legal rights as any other American. We will have an empty victory if we destroy the truth of our democratic government and fair administration of the law.
In the end, the trial came to a foregone conclusion. All 8 saboteurs were found guilty and condemned to death. Then, in a reversal, both Dash and Berger were given prison sentences. Dash, 30 years, Berger, life. The execution of the other 6 took place quickly by electric chair on August 11th, one after another, in 15-minute intervals.
Case closed.
Not so. To this day, the trial of the saboteurs, now known in legal circles as ex parte Quiron, is still debated.
The question comes down to, was George Dash a hero?
Dash wrote from prison, quote, "I came to this country not as a foe, but as an ally, ready and anxious to do my very best in helping to defeat the present government of Germany."
Even your special FBI agent William W. Turner said Dash is probably an authentic war hero, responsible for saving many lives.
Hero dedicated to right and reason. One wonders, after reading the transcript of the court-martial, if these words can really be used to describe attributes of George John Dash. The better descriptive words are self-centered, conniving, and if one can believe Dash's own words, he ran a long bluff, used people along the way, and is a fanatical liar, or the greatest storyteller of all time.
Everything Dash did was consistent with a pre-arranged, thought-out plan on his part to come back to the United States and expose the whole thing and not carry it out. J. Edgar Hoover got everything he wanted out of Operation Pastorius. He received the recognition he was looking for and was acclaimed as a national hero for rounding up 8 enemy saboteurs within days of their landing in the United States. President Roosevelt even authorized a bill for an appropriate Medal of Honor for Hoover.
So why did Hoover keep these files and records detailing the facts, kept under wraps for 30 years?
He made sure the American people did not know how the saboteurs were captured. Look, but on November 6, 1945, President Truman ordered that the entire record be made available to the public. The Attorney General announced that it could be inspected in room 5119 of the Department of Justice. However, for some unknown reason, on an unknown date, the transcript of the court-martial was removed from room 5119 and further access to it denied.
I was a master of public relations. Newspapers and magazine accounts praised Hoover and vilified Dash.
Letter to the editor, East Hampton Star. Death penalties handed down in the treason trial of the German saboteurs prove that Uncle Sam can be as tough as anyone. Each of those men had ties in America. They came for work, health, and happiness, and found it. They repaid America's hospitality with treason. It is their turn now to be repaid.
Here's another letter. Letter to U.S. Senator Meade, 1946, from an unknown person whose name has been censored. Dear Senator Meade, I am not acquainted with either Dash or Berger. They gave our government valuable, even vital information. It would seem logical if we had rewarded them. Instead, Dash was given a sentence of 30 years in prison and has refused even a pencil. And not these tactics on the government part of our government. Aren't these just as inhumane and offensive as Hitler's methods of dispensing justice?
Well, in 1948, both Dash and Berger were released from prison on a pardon from President Truman, which is customary for imprisoned spies and saboteurs when a war comes to an end. Both men were also ordered to be deported to Germany. J. Edgar Hoover was reportedly furious about the pardon and had both men rushed out of the country so quickly that neither Dash's American-born wife nor his attorney knew anything about what happened till Dash was on his way to Germany.
To the United States Attorney General, War Department, May 1949. My dear Mr. Clark, ever since my husband, Mr. George Dash, was deported to Germany in March, it has given me much sorrow for the very thought that I was not given a chance to meet and speak with him. I dearly love my husband, and I feel that it is only my duty as a duly wedded wife to be joined with him. I have filed my application and all the necessary papers for a permit to enter the French zone of Germany, and I have sent these out to the War Department. 3 months have gone now since I applied for the permit. I beg you to be so kind to look into this matter and this delay. I believe I am entitled to definite information on the progress. Thank you kindly. Sincerely yours, Marie Dash.
So, what do we conclude from all these files? Was Operation Pastorius doomed from the start by the very men who have been trained to carry out the destruction?
Or could it have succeeded? America's coastline was poorly defended. There was a sizable German-American population willing to offer shelter. The saboteurs were well-trained and well-financed.
Were the saboteurs working for the Nazis or against them? All were seduced by American plenty, which contrasted so starkly with wartime poverty in Germany.
Nobody in his right mind was going to go from a country like that to a country with everything like America and start blowing things up. You'd have to be nuts.
Did they have legal rights guaranteed by the United States Constitution? Or does our legal system depend on whether America is at war or peace?
Were they criminals deserving of death penalty? Or some said victims of J. Edgar Hoover's fanatical protection of the reputation of the FBI?
Well, you can come to your own conclusions. But after all is said and done, researched, written about, debated, reenacted, we come full circle back to the night of June 13th, 1942. The story starts right here in this building, on our very own Amagansett Beach, with a lone Coast Guardsman walking his patrol on a very foggy night 83 years ago. You can now applaud.